Juliet, really nice to talk to you. It's been about a year. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's nice to talk to you again.
And to see one another face to face, because we've done audio interviews in the past.
Yeah.
Uh, so we're going to be talking about a couple of things. The first is the Pahutakawa Journal, which is your latest journal book, and also some of the themes that were in Spirited Aging, which is a book that you wrote a little while ago. And so let's just catch up in terms of people who are familiar with your work but may not have yet seen Pahutakawa Journal. Where are you at, I guess, is the thing with this journal. What are the main things that you wanted to get across to your readers, and also about where you're at in life?
Yes, well, I'm in a very good place in life. I've moved into a village and I'm here with several hundred elders, and it's just fantastic to be really embedded in community. I'm thriving here. And the Pahutakawa Journal, this is a great moment for me, Andrew, because it's the completion of the trilogy, the Seasons of Life trilogy, which is the writing I moved into, my later life. And to have this completion just feels fantastic.
You said that being in the community you're now in is wonderful. Really, your books are all about community, though, aren't they? They're about connecting to people and also connecting to nature, and that's a major theme that you've wanted to write about since you began.
Yes, that's very true. And the connection with nature and the connections with community are very important themes.
And you'd been living or had a batch out at Bethel's for quite a few decades, and you had to sell that in the end. And I know how wrenching that was. You retained a section, and the Pahutakawa Journal kind of follows on from the after you've sold it. But I still sense there's some grief there, but also a sense that it's created a new sense of purpose for you as well, which seems contradictory, but it's definitely there in the book.
Yes, that's true. Selling the batch was a great grief, but I thought I'd done a clever thing by retaining the section next door, and they just sit alongside each other with no fence between them, and it felt a little bit like I was still keeping, access to the batch land. I could just look across and see the trees, but unfortunately, I couldn't get access from the driveway into the new block, and this wonderful Pahutakawa was standing in the way of the easiest point of entry. So that became an obstacle, this tree, and it also became a gateway because it did open me up to some very new and interesting experiences.
Well, I know you had a lot of bureaucratic battles and quite expensive battles in trying to get access with a driveway. But what I found really fascinating reading the journey you went on is that fundamentally, it's not that you gave in, but you found a compromise that actually was probably better for the land and for the spirit of the place, which is really fascinating, isn't it? It's you had a vision, but that vision changed, and in some ways it was a better outcome.
Yes, yes. Well, we won't do a spoiler, but it's true.
Yes, yeah.
What one reviewer called a glorious outcome, and it was. And I think the key for me through that kind of battle with the council was that the tree, I knew the tree, I needed to protect it. The council wouldn't have cared if I chopped it down, which would horrified me. But I needed to protect the tree. And instead of seeing the tree as only an obstacle, I started really connecting in deeply and taking a lot of guidance from the tree. And I just knew the tree wanted me to save it. It was 200 years old and a veteran and magnificent. And by coming into relationship with the tree, that just opened me up, because nature is a bigger world than our personal world. And nature has perspective and large breathing spaces. And when we connect with nature, we find possibilities that our little minds would never have thought.
The tree itself had damage to it from storm damage and other things, but it was resilient. it had new shoots coming out of it, and it was, your writing's always very lyrical and lovely, and it was good. These vivid descriptions you gave of the Putakawa tree were wonderful. But I couldn't help but think to myself that it was a living, real metaphor for you and your life in a way. That yes, the tree gets knocked, it gets damaged, but it finds a way of blossoming. And I wonder, have you thought about that as a metaphor for your own life?
Yes, it very much became a metaphor for my own life, and it taught me resilience, because I could see that the one of the contractors who came in said it fell over a long time ago, and where it fell over, it simply put up a new limb, which reached high into the sky. It was, in fact, one of the healthiest parts of the tree. And it taught me that don't worry if things fall over. Don't worry if some branches fall off. There's tremendous regeneration capacity in Pahutakawa. They know how to cling to cliffs, and they know how to recover from any accidents. And that was exactly what I needed to have modelled to me.
Yeah, and that's quite exciting, isn't it? When we think of ourselves as not being separate from nature, which too often all of us do, I think, from time to time, but we're actually part of this really dynamic, living earth, and of course, we can have that same kind of resilience ourselves.
Exactly, that is so true. We in nature are one, and if we see ourselves, I came to see myself as a tree, and not separate from the tree. And when we really have that degree of connection with nature, we take on the juiciness of nature. We infuse ourselves with what I call green energy, and it revitalizes us, and it gives us hope. And that degree of connection and that degree of intimacy with nature, as if we are kin, that is what gives us the strength and the power and the impetus to deal with climate change, for example.
And also for aging. So I wanted to kind of segue. That's a great way to segue into Spirited Aging, which is a book that you wrote some time ago. And you talk about a spiritual approach to aging. And I'm wondering if you could give a definition of what that means for you, because I know you're not necessarily thinking it's about a religious view, but how, even an atheist, how could an atheist have a spiritual view of life and of growing old? I'm wondering if you have a definition there.
A spiritual view is coming into a bigger perspective, and it's knowing that we are more than this body and all the limitations that go with the body, but in fact we have a degree of awareness that can be very, very expansive. And that really is, you could call that spiritual energy. We can tap into great wisdom, and we can tap into a larger energy. And that is the huge resource we need when we're aging.
And I guess also that that life is so much bigger than any individual. And as you've mentioned with the Putakawa, that all of us are part of this amazing planet, and we have the ability to adapt even to adverse things that happen to us. And I guess, from my interpretation, is that the spiritual side is finding meaning in things that we may not necessarily think there is an intrinsic meaning in.
It is about finding meaning, and instead of thinking this is happening to me and just going under or protesting or getting despair, what's this happening to me? When we find meaning, then everything takes on a different perspective, and we feel bigger. And as you say, we feel connected not only with all of life, but all of other people. We feel connected, like being in community, a large global community. We're all one.
You write about the traps of aging, things like denial, negativity, even outrage, that people feel sometimes when they when they get to a certain age. Were those things that you experienced yourself, and then how you emerge and got past those?
Yes, I did. Being in pain is really the greatest challenge, because pain does diminish us and contracts the brain, our mind, and our thinking. And we need to. I subtitled my book, Spirit and Aging, Cultivating the Art of Renewal. That's something nature teaches us, and that's something that I learned with aging and having to overcome these situations where I just felt I was getting hard done by. And when we start getting into that victim thinking, we just become smaller and smaller. But when we need to know how to lift our spirits, and finding meaning, trusting that that life moves in cycles and nothing stays the same, and taking on those kind of perspectives can lift us out of that kind of swampy place where we could sink forever.
And you write about accepting some things that you may not be able to change. So there could be adjustments that one has to make that you just have to accept, but not just simply accepting everything, or having a mindset that says, oh, well, I'm this old, this is inevitable now. So it's actually challenging some of those precepts as well.
I learned that from a spiritual teacher called Eckhart Tolle, which people may know. And he writes very beautifully on acceptance. And of course, if it's something you can change, you work to change it. But if you can't, there's a point where you need to surrender and accept. And that means the ego really has to give up and trust that you're still okay, even if you can't change this thing. And Eckhart Tolle describes this as a very sweet place, a place of where you relax. And when you accept that you can't change it, then you can look at, well, then what can I change? And the first thing usually that comes up is I can change my attitude.
You write also about constant reinvention, which I thought was really lovely. And how do you think you have reinvented yourself over the years? What do you think? How have you played with that?
I have reinvented myself many, many times. I could easily have been an academic. And then what I saw was a great disruption to my life when my marriage broke down, kind of hurtled me out of that possibility because I had a child to bring up. And that was really a good example of how what looks like a disaster can turn into an opportunity, because that's when I started developing my creative life. I started painting, I started making pottery, and I became an artist, much to my surprise. And then I became a writer, which was one of those things that happened because the art trail kind of went to a place where I always came out of an exhibition with a bill instead of something in my pocket. And I thought, this is not sustainable. And then becoming a writer has been a great joy. And now this is my last book. It's the 12th. And I'm now reinventing myself as a climate activist.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And so where is that taking you?
I have a couple of projects that are just waiting in the wings, not very patiently, I must say, because I have to complete the process of releasing this book. And I'm very concerned with matters around the treaty, and especially what's happening in our country. But I'm also looking at, I've got a few projects, and I'm going to link in with some other people, because I don't believe in doing these things alone. And we've got some meetings set up in the pipeline to start thinking about what we're wanting to do and how we can support one another.
Well, once again, it comes back to connection and community, doesn't it? Because things don't change without that, ultimately, do they?
It does. And when I went through a reading group, which was about really studying climate change, I got into great despair. And my nature connection brought me out of that and a few other things. But the leader of that group said, don't do this work alone. He was very, very clear. And it's true. And I got tremendous support from the whole group, and I came out of that, and I came out stronger.
I suppose finally, one last thing. How would you sum up, I guess, what your life philosophy is and what you have hopefully passed on to your children and your grandchildren?
I would say my life philosophy became clear when I stopped asking one question and asked myself another. And the question I used to ask myself was, what shall I do? And that was very based on me, me, me. And then I changed the question to, how can I best serve? And that's my philosophy. I look where there's a need and I want to serve. I want to serve humanity. I want to serve nature.
That's a lovely place to be. Juliet, thank you. And thank you for your continued writing. And I look forward to hearing about what you do in the activism space, because it's really important stuff. So thank you again.
Thank you, Andrew.